I finally figured out what the cause of absorbing other people's emotions is, and let me tell you, it was not at all what I was expecting. The solution isn't just setting boundaries or imagining a protective bubble around yourself, or calling out whose emotions are whose. And the reason you're doing it isn't because you were born an empath. You are not doomed to absorb other people's emotions simply because you are a sensitive person with a higher degree of empathy. Absorbing other people's emotions is actually a symptom of a developed pattern that can be healed. I used to struggle so much with absorbing other people's emotions, and I couldn't figure out what the solution was. Even well into becoming a coach, I'd have HSPs and empaths ask me how they could stop absorbing other people's emotions, and I'd only be able to tell them it was truthfully something I was still struggling with too, and therefore didn't really have a good solution for. I had tried all the ideas out there that I could find, visualizing and putting up an imaginary shield, or trying to distance myself, shake it off. None of it prevented me from absorbing the emotions of others. I didn't just want to manage it, I wanted to stop doing it entirely. Even with protection bubbles, practicing boundaries, consciously trying to work through and identify whose emotions were whose, I still felt like a sponge in my interactions, involuntarily soaking up the emotions and feeling states of other people. It was almost as if the more I directly tried to figure out the solution, the more I tried to push their emotions away, shield myself from them, or just tried to plug my ears and shut my eyes every time I felt myself starting to absorb others' emotions, or just give up and run away entirely from the interaction. My problem of absorbing others' emotions only persisted. Eventually, I sort of just gave up. I figured maybe absorbing others' emotions is just part of being an empath, which is actually a term I don't identify myself as anymore, but more on that later. So I let the issue go, stopped thinking about it, and just brought my attention to other things that I wanted to work on within myself. I started focusing my energy and attention on healing a seemingly unrelated part of myself, and out of the blue one day, I thought about it and realized I wasn't really absorbing people's emotions anymore. And if I had to quantify it, I'd probably say it was happening about 80% less than it used to, which was pleasantly surprising as this was something I had struggled with my whole life, and I hadn't even been actively trying anymore to figure out how to stop. It was one of those things where when I stopped actively trying to solve the issue, stopped focusing so much on the problem, it solved itself. And herein actually lies the core of the problem and the block to the solution. The main reason why we struggle to figure out how to stop absorbing other people's emotions is the same reason why we have the problem in the first place, directing so much of our focus outward rather than inward. For the rest of my video, I'm going to tell you exactly what I mean by this and how you can finally stop absorbing others' emotions and heal the part of yourself that's causing you to do this in the first place. When I discovered the terms highly sensitive person and empath, I felt incredibly seen and understood. I began to wear these labels with pride, finally feeling like I belonged. I came to interpret that this highly sensitive part of me was this innate difference that I had in my nervous system that is profoundly sensitive to my environment and those around me, and a brain that takes in so much sensory information and processes it deeply. And that the empath part of me was this special added ability to not only be able to notice and attune to other people's emotional states, but to go even one step further to absorbing them. It seemed like a default mode of operating for me, something I truly had no control over or choice in. I came to think of this empathy as a profound ability, a natural gift, a special way that I was able to deeply connect with others, and it was something that made me unique and helped me have stronger, deeper, more loving and connected relationships. But I realized over time, this ability actually made my relationships more challenging. As I grew older and wiser and more educated on healthy relationships, a subject I truly needed to seek out education on, as I didn't have the kind of experiences and examples I needed growing up to inherently understand what healthy relationships actually look like. I started to become conscious of how absorbing other people's emotions was in fact not benefiting the health of my relationships, nor was I doing the other person the favor that I told myself I was doing them by taking on their emotions. Because here's a quick spoiler from later in this video. That's not even possible. You can't take away someone else's pain by absorbing it, despite what we would all wish when we are seeing someone we love suffer. And we can't do another person's emotional work for them, because truthfully, that would defeat the whole purpose of that person having that emotional experience to begin with. So, no, absorbing other people's emotions is not a fundamental or inherent part of being a highly sensitive person that you are doomed to just because you're sensitive. And if you view yourself as an empath and feel attached to that label like I once did, you likely will continue to absorb other people's emotions because you're identifying with it. But more on that soon. And actually, before we get too deep into this topic, I just want to clarify that I'm not a therapist or a scientist, and what I'm going to be sharing with you are insights from what has helped me, and my own experiences as a highly sensitive person trying to self-reflect, heal, and improve my life, and then hopefully be able to help other people do the same. And my theory about what the source of the issue is that I've landed on as a result of my own experience, I think might also apply to a lot of other HSPs because it incorporates the unique ways in which our nervous systems and brains are wired as sensitive people. Valid psychological concepts and common themes I've noticed about the struggles that so many HSPs have described and the stories they've shared about what they've gone through. If this is your first video of mine, I'm Tiara Ariel, a highly sensitive person and a certified wellness coach on a mission to help as many HSPs as I can improve their health, relationships, and career through my content here on YouTube, as well as the online coaching program and course I've created that includes over 160 video modules, helping you set boundaries, customize a self-care routine, discover your life purpose and implement a plan to pursue it, have healthier, more meaningful relationships, and much, much more. I also have a free online masterclass covering what I've learned is vital to nurture in our lives in order to thrive as highly sensitive people. So if you're an HSP who's determined to thrive, you're in the right place. And I'm so glad you found me and my channel. I hope you will become a subscriber and join the movement of HSPs stepping into their power. And check out all the links to these various resources in the description. Okay, so with all of that said, my suspicion as to why so many HSPs struggle with absorbing other people's emotions has to do with a psychological concept called self-abandonment. And it's exactly how it sounds. When we as sensitive people who have a high degree of empathy learn that it is useful to lean into this skill as a way to navigate challenging relationships to the point that we are in the habit of focusing heavily on others' experiences during our interactions, it's not only that we're so focused on others, it's that as a direct result, we're also then disconnected from ourselves. And that's actually the real problem. When we habitually abandon our own experience for the purpose of attuning to another's, so much so that it becomes a default, subconscious way of operating in all of our relationships. And then we now have an ingrained pattern that manifests as absorbing others' emotions. And this is where it really started to make sense to me why I struggled to figure out how to stop absorbing other people's emotions before. Because the way I had approached trying to find the solution was a direct reflection of the problem. Trying to absorb others' emotions less is still an attention that is focused outward on that other person. How do I shield myself from them? How do I absorb what they're giving out less? How do I figure out what to do with the emotions they're feeling, etc.? But the solution is, as annoyingly simple as it sounds, to pull and redirect our focus back onto ourselves. And before you scoff and click away because that can't be the solution, because it's way too basic. You can't ignore the problem and expect it to go away, right? Or maybe the idea of focusing on yourself and not them feels like a risky option. What about the other person? They are still going to be emoting, and how am I supposed to shield myself from that? If I take my focus off them and their emotions, won't the problem just get worse? If I'm not actively managing the emotional energies coming towards me, I'll get flooded by them, won't I? And how am I still supposed to show up for them and be a support for them if I'm primarily focused on myself? Isn't that selfish? If you're thinking any of these things, I completely understand where you're coming from. They are logical thoughts to have in response to this problem. But the answer really is to just redirect your focus. I know that sounds too simple, too easy. That absorbing others' emotions is something that's happening on an emotional and energetic or even instinctual level. Not something that you can just consciously choose not to do. We've tried that plenty of times and it doesn't work, right? I totally get it. If someone had told me years ago that redirecting my focus was the solution, I would have laughed. But directing your focus back to yourself is a really important thing. Because if you struggle with absorbing other people's emotions, that means that your energetic focus probably hasn't been primarily anchored within yourself for a very long time. And even if you're like I was, and you're thinking, well, that's not me, that's not my problem, I'm a very self-aware person. Most highly sensitive people do tend to be very conscientious, self-reflective people. But what I'm talking about is a very specific level of self-neglect that's probably been flying under your radar, because you haven't known any other way of operating. Being energetically focused outward probably feels so normal to you that you don't even realize you're doing it. Absorbing other people's emotions is all you know. If so far my proposed solution sounds too simple, then let me mention that the deeper challenge of redirecting our focus lies in having to unlearn a deeply ingrained and likely subconscious habit of being oriented towards others, and then teaching ourselves instead how to be self-oriented, something that we didn't even know we didn't know. But thankfully, you don't have to go figure out how to learn what you don't even know you need to learn, because that's what I'm here for. Until we understand the deeper drivers of our behavior and the way we show up in relationships and in life, we're stuck in the passenger seat and our subconscious has the wheel, for better or worse. Seeing all of this clearly for what it is allowed me to consciously reclaim the driver's seat and tell the other conditioned behaviors, with much gratitude for their hard work up until this point, to just relax and take a back seat. Absorbing and identifying with another person's experience happens as a natural byproduct of habitually focusing on the experience of others, flexing that empathy muscle, and building up that neural pathway. And building the neural pathway that defaults to focusing on others naturally causes the one that defaults to staying grounded in your own experience to fade. The more we focus externally, even if it's in the hopes of finding a solution, all it does is reinforce our focus on something outside of ourselves. We give it more power. It expands and takes up more room in our awareness, and we give it more life. Where your attention goes, your energy flows. What if you've been unknowingly and habitually directing all of your focus outward this whole time, and then now decide to just try to switch gears to instead practicing forgetting about what's going on out there, and redirecting your primary attention onto yourself and your own thoughts, behaviors, and feelings, and the problem of absorbing other people's emotions naturally dissolves on its own. This whole idea is what I refer to as being internally anchored, which is my way of describing where your experiential or energetic awareness is primarily centered within, focused on, or tethered to. Whatever description lands most vividly for you in your mind, go with it. I like to use the term anchor because an anchor to me is something that is centralized, has weight, that grounds you within a space, helps inform you and keep you aware of where you are within that space, makes it so that you remain there, and is something that you are attached to by a strong connecting rope or tether. In my experience, I've found that once you understand why you might be externally anchored, you begin to see how to become internally anchored, and why doing so is so crucial to your own personal well-being and the health of all of your relationships too. So let's dive into some plausible origins of self-abandonment and being externally anchored for highly sensitive people specifically, because having a deeper understanding of this might be what sets off the right light bulbs in your head to finally gain the perspective of this dynamic that you need to be able to take your power back over it. Highly sensitive people are individuals that are born with nervous systems that are more sensitive than those without this trait. They are by definition more affected by influences from their environment, positive or negative. Because of the way that we are wired, highly sensitive people by nature have natural skill sets that allow us to tune into our surroundings and the people around us and possess a higher degree of empathy. It is easy then to imagine that if an HSP is subjected to unhealthy relationship dynamics, this predisposition to being more deeply affected by their surroundings and higher degrees of empathy can increase the chance that a sensitive person will be negatively affected in a way that encourages them to lean into these attunement skills in order to figure out how to accommodate, appease, or heavily support others. HSPs exposed to these types of formative experiences may find themselves later in life primarily focused on the needs and feelings of others, prioritizing them over their own in an attempt to maintain harmony or secure connection in relationships. Being overly attuned to others, so much so that it becomes a pattern of disconnecting from our own experience, can result from situations where we learned that focusing on others' needs, feelings, opinions, etc., kept us safe or made us feel useful or lovable. For example, having a volatile family member who everyone else feels they have to cater to or tiptoe around. Having a distant or neglectful family member who you feel like you have to strategize to earn their love and attention. Having a family member who models the behavior of sacrificing themselves as love for everyone else. Or any experience that repeatedly pulled our awareness away from our own experiences and taught and showed us convincing evidence that it is beneficial to our relationships in one way or another to disregard our own needs, feelings, and experiences and heavily prioritize others instead. This is when our natural inclination towards being able to skillfully attune to others and empathize with their experience starts becoming a maladaptive coping mechanism, a pattern of self-abandonment. This is where that energetic and experiential awareness starts becoming anchored more outside of ourselves and less within ourselves. This is even more likely when unhealthy environments or relationship dynamics play out chronically, and especially if this occurs when we are young and our brains, our understanding of the world around us, our ideas about what is normal, and our own sense of who we are and our place in the world are all still developing. Repeated chronic unhealthy relationship dynamics can force us to lean heavily on our ability to attune to others as a survival skill, which is actually a genius thing for us to do. Instinctually utilize our natural inclinations and turn them into ways to keep ourselves safe. Truthfully, for many of us, finding a way to neglect our own emotional experiences as a way to attend to another's at one point in time could have been a life-saving behavior. It's an effective coping mechanism in the short term to survive stressful situations, where maybe you were young and didn't have autonomy. But long-term, self-abandonment isn't supportive to having healthy relationships. In fact, patterns of self-abandonment will prevent you from ever being able to have healthy, fulfilling, mutually respectful, reciprocal relationships. Self-abandonment patterns can also result from being told over and over again that you are too sensitive. Unfortunately, many HSPs frequently hear these words and get the message that their feelings are somehow wrong or inaccurate. It is not uncommon then, as a result, to begin to distrust your own senses and discount them as trustworthy gauges for your understanding of the world around you. This can then socialize and condition a person in such a way that they then learn it's more optimal and accurate to rely on the thoughts, opinions, and feelings of others to make sense of their experiences, and consciously or not, doubt their own perceptions as viable. Over time, they might even disconnect from their own internal indicators entirely and solely look to others' emotions and thoughts to make sense of their reality. When a person develops an ingrained subconscious pattern of gauging what's going on in their own world based primarily on the social emotional feedback of others around them, they can, without consciously realizing it, begin to feel and see others' feelings as though they are their own. Absorbing others' emotions then may actually be more accurately described as subconsciously over-identifying with them. An increased sensitivity to the environment, plus a high degree of empathy put into unhealthy relationship dynamics, very logically can lead to learned self-abandonment behaviors. Chronic patterns of self-abandonment can lead to dissociating from our own experiences and identifying more so with the experiences of those around us, without us even realizing that's what we're doing. The more I learn about the HSP trait, the nervous system, and the subconscious mind from a scientific perspective, the psychological effects that our childhood experiences and chronic stress can have on the way that we are wired, and look at the common struggles of so many HSPs, the more I've come to firmly believe that absorbing others' emotions is not actually an innate gift. It's a natural attunement skill and a predisposition to a higher degree of empathy that have been warped by stress into a practiced mode of self-abandonment. These types of realizations about many of the widely accepted downsides of the HSP trait, possibly just being ways that our nervous systems have adapted to chronic stress, has completely changed the way that I view my trait, helped me heal a great deal of my sense of worth as an HSP, and empowered me to feel like I then have the ability to heal and improve my life. And so far, as I've worked on healing myself, these so-called negative aspects of the trait that supposedly come with being a highly sensitive person have actually been fading within my experience. I'm experiencing them less and less as I heal, and experiencing the benefits of being a highly sensitive person more and more. These ideas have been revelations that have absolutely changed my life. I have a whole theory about how the things that are commonly assumed to just be struggles inherent to the HSP trait are in fact actually maladaptive coping mechanisms in responses to chronic stress that this whole time we've been wrongly attributing to the HSP trait. So if that really hits a chord for you, I've got a full video about that you can watch later. I'll link it in the description. In my experience being immersed for several years now in the expansion of the awareness and research around the highly sensitive trait, so many people out there seem to consider absorbing others' emotions to be a normal and expected part of being a sensitive person. But self-abandonment and the habit of chronically neglecting our own internal world in the presence of others, continually prioritizing others' needs over our own, and overly identifying with their emotions are all learned behaviors and conditioned ways of operating in relationship that were brought forth as a result of a survival mode and are not inherent to the HSP trait. We as HSPs may just be more susceptible to these types of experiences negatively affecting us, and therefore result in effects like struggling with emotional absorption more often than others because we are more sensitive. But being sensitive doesn't automatically mean we absorb others' emotions. Being sensitive plus stressful environments equals skills that get pushed to the extreme for our survival. What is in fact inherent to the HSP trait is a brain that is wired to pay more close attention to the social emotional cues of others and more active mirror neurons, the part of the brain responsible for empathy. So, we as HSPs have a high capacity and potential to attune to others' experiences, but not necessarily to neglect our own. We are not wired for self-abandonment. We are wired for attunement. That is a very important distinction. When we understand consciously what healthy relationship dynamics and expectations are, and develop the habit of behaving accordingly, so that these new beliefs and behaviors that are in alignment with having healthy relationships become the new subconscious ways of operating, we are able to utilize our empathy and attunement skills in healthy, beneficial ways that support our relationship's success and that don't require us to abandon ourselves. These patterns of self-abandonment and absorbing other people's emotions can be healed. You can go from being habitually externally anchored in others' experiences to, over time, building up the habit of being primarily anchored within your own self. The process involves redirecting our loving attention back to our own inner experience, realizing that our internal sensors were never broken, and understanding that we deserve to stay grounded in our own experience and honor our own needs and emotions, and that healthy, respectful, loving, and supportive relationships will never require us to abandon ourselves. We heal self-abandonment by vowing to ourselves that now that we are aware of these patterns, we will not continue to neglect ourselves. That with time and practice, we will break the habit of being externally anchored. That we will do our best from here on out to practice committing to ourselves and our own well-being. To make space for that person inside of us to stand tall and stretch and become alive again. To be heard and seen at the very least by our own selves. And to create the safety within our own selves that allows us to feel secure stepping into this level of embodiment. A level of embodiment that helps us to stand tall and grounded, confident and secure, anchored within our own sense of self, primarily assessing our world through our own senses, having our own formed thoughts and opinions, being more in touch with our own emotions, and seeing them as valid messengers, providing us with important information about how we feel in the presence of certain people and in certain environments. You need to be in touch with this information in order to navigate this world successfully, as anyone, but especially as an HSP. Our sensitive nervous system is a sophisticated and intricate information gathering and interpretation system, one that needs to be honored and protected. Think of your highly sensitive nervous system as an advanced piece of technology sitting in the middle of a high-security room that is a delicate and valuable instrument that deserves to be able to do its job in peace. If this piece of equipment was being messed with by unauthorized personnel, overloaded with too much information at once, neglected to be properly cared for, or ignored and left to collect dust, this incredible piece of technology wouldn't be able to provide us with the extremely valuable data that it can provide. You need to be able to honor, protect, and stay grounded in your own indicators in life. Without being in touch with the signals that our highly sensitive nervous systems are sending us, we can unintentionally end up walking all over our own boundaries, draining our own energy, and even losing trust with ourselves, and struggling to figure out why we keep finding ourselves in stressful environments and relationships without even realizing what's happening and why it keeps happening. Self-abandonment, if it's a pattern of yours, is likely a deep wound and will require consistent baby steps, but your emotional, mental, and physical health and the health of your relationships and your overall life will all benefit from you healing these patterns. Why I don't identify as an empath anymore. From my own experience as a sensitive person, what I've learned about psychology and childhood conditioning, and what's truly inherent to the HSP trait from a scientific perspective, I've come to believe that absorbing people's emotions is a symptom of self-abandonment. A big part of my ability to heal this aspect of self-abandonment within myself that has felt tethered to other people's emotional experiences has been the ways in which I've been able to heal my own view of myself and my highly sensitive trait. Seeing these aspects of myself as responses to stress has allowed me to then see them as parts of myself that need healing, rather than viewing them as inherent characteristics that are bound to be a part of my experience indefinitely. I'm able to look at them as separate from me, things that I can interact with, things that I can give love and compassion to, and things that I can work with. Shifting my perception from, I'm a highly sensitive person and an empath that absorbs other people's emotions, and this is just something that's always going to be a part of who I am, to, I'm a highly sensitive person that has been through periods of chronic stress that have affected me, who is working on healing the ways in which my nervous system has been overworked, and the ways in which I've been conditioned to accommodate unhealthy relationships, has helped me feel so much more empowered, secure, and self-compassionate. And I'm genuinely seeing a tangible difference in my experience. With healing work, a new self-concept, and time, these struggles have been slowly but surely falling away from my experience and my identity. I no longer view myself as someone that gets overwhelmed in all overly stimulating environments. I now view myself as someone who, if I'm not taking proper care of myself and I'm not honoring and keeping track of my own limits, will experience natural consequences. I no longer see myself as someone who is destined to overthink all the time. I see myself as someone whose mind had been taxed, who experienced psychological stress, who had been obsessed with solving problems and staying one step ahead of the people around her, for the sake of her own survival. Someone who is healing, protecting herself, and allowing herself the permission and creating the safety needed to be in her head less and in her body more. I no longer view myself as someone who absorbs others' emotions. I view myself as someone with a great capacity for empathy, with good boundaries, who knows how to be a supportive presence without taking things on, knows where her responsibility begins and another's starts, who has a strong sense of self-worth, who is committed to never reverting back to self-abandonment patterns again, and is therefore no longer concerned about getting disoriented around, lost in, or swallowed up by other people's experiences and feelings. How you view yourself is so important. If you view something as a fixed part of your identity, it becomes much, much harder to shift, heal, or change. When you identify as someone who does a certain thing, it becomes much harder to then behave in a way that is in alignment with a belief that doesn't include that label. This can work for you or against you on your healing journey, depending on what it is you are choosing to believe as a fundamental aspect of who you are. To me, being an empath by definition means absorbing other people's emotions, so that label no longer feels beneficial for me to identify with. I still use the word empath in my branding because I want those who do identify as an empath to find me and my content, because I know that what I talk about will be helpful to HSPs and empaths out there who want to improve their lives and heal. And of course, there are different ways to interpret the definition of what an empath is, and if using the term empath helps you in your own self-understanding and self-concept, and positively adds to your self-image or makes you feel pride or comfort, then perhaps for you, viewing yourself as an empath is beneficial for you. What I want to emphasize here is a reminder that what you identify yourself as has a strong influence on how you're able to show up in your life. So make sure any labels you are attaching to yourself and whatever you see yourself as is helpful to your personal growth and healing, feels empowering, and is self-loving. When I first discovered and began learning about highly sensitive people and empaths, both descriptions felt comforting and validating to me. I felt like between these two terms, I had been able to fully fill in the parts of my life experiences, my identity, my personality that I never had explanations for or ways to articulate prior. I came to understand through all kinds of literature on the HSP trait, including Dr. Elaine Aron's books, that being highly sensitive was a genetic trait I possessed, someone born with a more sensitive nervous system. And through information on empaths as well, including Dr. Judith Orloff's writings on being an empath, I came to think of the empath part of me as this additional, standalone ability I had alongside of being highly sensitive, to be able to even more deeply connect with another person's emotional experience. But the more I've explored these ideas behind the connection between self-abandonment and absorbing others' emotions, and realizing that this type of behavior isn't actually all that healthy or helpful in relationships the way I'd previously thought it was, my perception of the term empath started to change. I now view being an empath as someone whose empathy has gone beyond a deep compassion for another person's experiences into actually absorbing them. It used to feel like a challenging superpower, but now I see it as a deeply wounded part of myself, playing out an unhealthy way of relating to others and abandoning myself. I have started to see absorbing others' emotions more as a trauma response, and not necessarily an innate gift. When I first caught glimpses of the idea that maybe the empath trait was just a trauma response, I resisted the idea. This was a label I felt comforted by for so long and viewed being an empath as a beautiful thing. However, as I've worked on healing my self-abandonment wounds and raising my self-worth, and educated myself on what healthy relationship dynamics are, holding healthier standards, and showing up accordingly in my relationships, the term empath no longer resonates with me the way that it used to, and doesn't truly feel necessary or even accurate to describe my experience anymore. Because as I've done this work, I've absorbed other people's emotions less and less, so much to the point that I'm not even sure I'm doing it at all anymore. I know that there are plenty of other qualities that are usually included in the empath description, like being really connected to animals and nature, but I also feel that that can be true of the highly sensitive person as well. Empaths are often described as being intuitive too, but again, I think highly sensitive people, and really anyone, has the ability to develop their own intuition, as I view intuition as an instinctual sense that any conscious being can learn to access within themselves. I feel much more secure and empowered viewing myself as an HSP, someone born with a sensitive nervous system as a blank slate, who at various points in life, out of necessity, had to lean heavily into these natural inclinations as a way to cope with chronically stressful situations and environments, who was working on healing these effects of chronic stress, so that these skill sets that have spilled over into dysfunction can be soothed back into balance, so that they can solely be useful skills that help me progress in life in healthy ways. I can be someone with a high degree of empathy and social emotional attunement skills that remains anchored in her own experience, beliefs, and feelings, and does not get flooded by the emotions of others, which will actually allow me to be more present and grounded, and therefore be more supportive to the people I want to connect with in the first place. We can heal this aspect of ourselves that is likely derived from trauma or stress or poor conditioning, and keep the skill set it has lended us, and just soothe and redirect it for a better, healthier use. Empathy on its own is still an incredibly important, valuable, and desirable quality to possess in one's character, and we as sensitive people can use this skill and talent we have in ways that are healthier for us and our relationships, like being keenly aware of others' emotional states, and being able to tend to them more diligently, being more attentive and sensitive to what someone is going through, noticing when others may be in pain and may need a loving presence, but may be too shy or uncomfortable to ask, recognizing when someone may need help or a hug and offering it to them if they desire it. But we draw the line at abandoning our own feelings for the sake of another's. We draw the line at being in charge of managing their emotions and feeling as though it's our responsibility to make them feel better, or identifying with them or taking them on as our own to work through. We think that absorbing other people's emotions is beneficial to being so connected, but it's not. It's actually backfiring. So we've talked about why many HSPs may struggle with absorbing other people's emotions, and plausible origins of where that may stem from. And for the rest of the video, I want to talk to you about how to stop absorbing other people's emotions and become internally anchored. The how of doing that is equal parts practice and equal parts really understanding the difference between using our sensitivity and empathy skills in healthy ways, and what empathy and unhealthy dynamics looks like. Because if you're anything like I was, you may not have even known what healthy relationships consist of, and therefore may not fully see yet why absorbing other people's emotions is all that undesirable or dysfunctional. If you are frequently absorbing others' emotions, this means that you are inappropriately assigning your realm of responsibility. When you absorb someone's distressed emotions, you'll automatically feel compelled and responsible to fix them. One, because you're so tuned into others' emotions, your sense of empathy will lead you to feel badly about someone else experiencing a difficult emotion, and then you want to fix it. Studies show that there is a higher activation in the brain of an HSP in the areas that indicate we want to take action and do something when exposed to a picture of someone emoting distress, especially if it's a loved one. And two, when you have absorbed someone else's challenging emotion, you are now experiencing it yourself, so now you're uncomfortable and will want to figure out how to make it go away, not only for their sake, but now for yours too. So, likely, without even realizing this is what you're doing, you'll take on the effort to change the person's emotional state in an attempt to also restore your own emotional state back to balance. Because when you absorb and take responsibility for the emotional states of others, you feel that the only way to restore your own emotional well-being is to restore theirs. When you absorb others' emotions, you need everyone around you to be okay in order for you to be okay, and that's stressful and exhausting, and is a level of homeostasis that's nearly impossible to maintain entirely on your own. Changing someone else's emotional state is not your job, nor is it even always possible. You can be supportive, but it's never your responsibility to try and regulate or manage someone else's emotions. Not only is this exhausting for you, because you're constantly putting an effort into something you ultimately don't have control over. Taking responsibility for regulating another's emotional state also hinders the other person's ability to develop the self-regulation skills and self-awareness that they need to achieve emotional self-sufficiency. Despite what you might wish to be true, we can't take away another person's pain. All we can do is be present with them while they move through it themselves. And being present requires you to stay anchored in your own self, so that you can serve as a grounded presence for that person to find comfort in. It's actually much more helpful to that person in the moment of distress for you to remain in your own energy and show that you hear and see them in their pain and are there for them as a reliable support, than to get absorbed in their emotions and simply mirror an exact replica of their emotions back to them. The sweet spot lies in being empathetic and letting them know that you validate, understand, and respect their emotions, while still remaining anchored in your own self. Maybe we as HSPs often easily slip into empathizing so intensely with other people because that's what we might crave for ourselves, to have someone else see and validate the kinds of deep, intense emotional experiences we've had moving through our lives as sensitive people. But what you want is someone who is present enough in their own experience that they can serve as a witness to your pain and put words to what they see you expressing in your experience. Not to have them necessarily get so sucked into what you are experiencing that they actually take on and directly mirror back your emotions, and now also need to be consoled and comforted. Absorbing others' emotions means not supporting them or creating connection the way that you think you are, and not being what they actually need, a grounded external presence. Back in high school, when I struggled with anxiety and panic attacks, I was dating someone who also struggled with anxiety and panic attacks. It was nice to be with someone that we both felt understood by, but when it actually came down to one of those moments where one of us was really anxious, we would pass the anxiety attack back and forth to each other like a hot potato, instead of being able to be a grounded presence for the other. When he was having a panic attack, I would empathize so much with his experience that it would trigger a panic attack within me. And instead of being present enough in my own experience to be a grounded presence for him, he then had to comfort me instead of receiving the support that he needed from me. This is a true story. My high school boyfriend came into the lunchroom one day at school with a panic attack, and several minutes later he was taking me to the nurse for symptoms of a panic attack. If I had been more anchored in my own experience, I could have served as a much better support for him, given him the grounded energy that he needed, validated his experience by verbally calling out the anxious experience that I could see him having, and deeply related to, shown him that I understood and that it would be okay, and he would have felt calmed down and comforted, while I remained steady without getting sucked into his distress. I actually made it more difficult for him when he came to me for empathy by absorbing his anxious state, and lost the opportunity to truly make him feel seen and comforted, and connect with him in a way that would have actually strengthened our relationship. Taking on someone's emotions isn't doing them the favor we think it's doing, and it's not creating connection the way that we might think it is. We need to have the ability to stay grounded and present within our own selves and the tools and skills to validate someone else's experiences in a way that makes them feel seen and heard in their experience, not just mirroring, duplicating, or even stealing their emotional states away from them. Everyone has their lessons to work through, and that's part of being human. Even if we could successfully take on someone else's emotional experience by doing the work for them, this would rob the other person of experiencing life at the emotional depth that comes with being human. It would rob them of the opportunity to grieve, heal, and grow, and go through the emotional processing they need to in order to come out the other side more evolved and more equipped, with tools and internal resources for themselves. The most loving thing we can do is model the behavior of self-regulation and healthy self-expression, not trying to do something for them on their behalf that they are capable of doing for themselves. Be supportive, affirming, validating, and present, while encouraging and empowering them to move through it themselves. Absorbing others' emotions means crossing over your side of the relationship table and perpetuating unhealthy dynamics. If the other person is struggling to work through or get in touch with their own emotions and articulate them, it is not your job to read and decipher other people's emotions for the purpose of anticipating their needs, or to take on their emotions for the purpose of trying to heal, fix, or save them. It is their job to communicate their feelings and needs to you, clearly and respectfully. Your only job is to be available, attentive, and to listen, to be a compassionate and understanding presence, a safe audience within which they can open up, to hold the space to allow them to explore and decipher whatever it is they are feeling. You can respond to their requests for whatever it is they tell you they need. You can be sensitive and empathetic without needing to change their emotional state. Showing up for those you love as someone that offers their undivided attention, validates another's experience, and offers kind, encouraging words and ideas for solutions when welcomed are all healthy and helpful ways to be supportive. You don't need to turn off your empathy. It's not necessary to entirely abandon your concern for another person's emotional state or not care about how they are feeling, but you do need to not abandon your own well-being in the process and cease to manage where your own energy is flowing. The line you need to draw in the sand is where your responsibility ends and the other person's begins. I often describe this idea of this line in the sand as crossing over your side of the metaphorical relationship table. Imagine you were at a nice restaurant, seated at a round dinner table sitting across from a loved one. If you think about this very literally, if you wanted the salt and it was on the other person's half of the table, you would ask them to hand it to you. That would be proper dinner etiquette. You wouldn't stand up, lean completely over the table, likely get the bottom of your shirt in your food, grab the salt from next to their plate, and then retreat and sit back down. Metaphorically, if you are sitting across from someone at a table and the table serves as a symbol for your relationship, then whenever you are engaging in any sort of relational behavior, ask yourself if you are crossing the middle line of the table. Am I reaching past my side of the table? Am I attempting to do this other person's emotional, relational, or communication work for them? The same can be asked about the other person. Are they meeting me in the middle? Are they crossing over onto my side of the table, getting too involved in controlling my actions, thoughts, or beliefs? Are they hanging back and expecting me to cross my side of the table in order to connect with them, to read their mind, or figure out how to manage or accommodate their unregulated emotions? When we are so connected with their side of the table that we are absorbing their emotions, trying to do their emotional work for them, trying to anticipate their needs and preemptively meet them before they have figured that out for themselves and communicated it, trying to change or control their emotional state because the thought of them being unhappy makes us uncomfortable, and therefore we can't relax until we've made them happy. We are reaching far beyond our side of the table. And I bet you even feel from this description how exhausting and even overbearing this sounds. But these are all things so many of us sensitive people are unconsciously doing without realizing how dysfunctional it is. Because in our minds, we're just being really, really, really caring. And pointing this out isn't to shame you. It's to liberate you with the truth so that you can heal and have healthier, happier relationships and gain a lot of your energy back. These were all hard realizations I had to have to move forward and break these relational patterns. When either party in a relationship isn't securely managing and owning their side of the table, relational dynamics get thrown out of balance and encourage patterns of dysfunction. If you consistently reach far beyond your side of the table, you encourage the other person to sit back and do nothing. They barely have to move because you're doing so much work. And if you sit back and do nothing and don't speak up when you need to, you encourage the other person to spill and stretch all over your side of the table. We need to own our part, know our place, do our own work, and meet people in the middle, and let people meet us in the middle. Or, in some cases, notice that when you do go back to a healthy level of ownership of your side of the table and your side only, that some people won't meet you in the middle, and to reevaluate the type of energy you're giving to that specific relationship, and figure out if it deserves a coveted spot in your life if it isn't truly balanced and reciprocal. When you're anchored in your own experience, your only responsibilities are to honor, decipher, and find appropriate ways to express and communicate your own emotions. You're only responsible for what you can control. This is much more healthy, manageable, and how it should be. When you focus on solely taking ownership for your side of the table, this requires the other person to take responsibility for theirs, self-reflect and maintain self-awareness, communicate their feelings and needs, and do their own emotional work, which now frees you up to focus on yours. Absorbing others' emotions can mean neglecting your own emotional work. I think oftentimes empaths feel that they have a high degree of emotional intelligence because they are so in touch with the language of emotions and so aware of what's going on in others' emotional worlds. But an important aspect of emotional maturity is utilizing that intelligence and awareness to tend to our own emotions too, not just utilizing our emotional fluency for the sake of understanding and supporting other people. Sometimes so many of us sensitive people are so focused on others' emotional states that we aren't aware that we aren't really tending to our own emotional work. And when this first occurred to me, it was so triggering. This thought made me feel so invalidated and unseen because I felt like I had been in the thick of dealing with my own emotional roller coaster my entire life and was tired of navigating the sea of my own emotions. In a way, focusing on other people's emotions was easier for me. And that's where I realized that this, in fact, did hold some truth. I had been focusing on other people's emotions as a way to avoid really sitting with my own. We so much want the other person to change or be healed or show up differently or feel differently, rather than turning towards ourselves and acknowledging the painful truth of how the ways in which we are showing up in the relationship is contributing to the dynamic. It's much harder to acknowledge where we need to grow in order to fix these patterns, especially if we feel we're getting hurt, used, abandoned, neglected, etc. So if this thought is also triggering to you right now, too, I totally get it. It didn't feel true to me that I wasn't doing my own emotional work or feeling my own emotions or participating in my own personal growth. I had felt like I was obsessively doing that for so long. It wasn't true that I wasn't attending to or feeling my own emotions when I was alone, but it was true that when I was actively engaging in interactions with other people, I was in fact disconnecting from myself and abandoning my own experience. This is where so many of us run into issues with being drained in our relationships because we're cutting off our connection to the part of ourselves that indicates to us during a conversation that it's time to exit, speak up, or redirect or shift the interaction. And truthfully, sometimes being in the thick of my own emotions felt overwhelming, especially back when I really didn't have any emotional regulation skills. So in a way, it was kind of a relief sometimes to just focus on other people's emotions. But disconnecting from your own emotions doesn't make them go away, it just makes them persist. It makes accessing these emotions in order to process them effectively more challenging, and it forces your emotions to find other outlets to get your attention. When I was externally oriented towards other people's experiences, I was neglecting my own self. I wasn't present with myself moment to moment. I wasn't honoring my own experience and emotions. So while I was very practiced in deeply understanding and attending to other people's emotional experiences, there was a whole facet of my own healing that I wasn't attending to. The part that required me to really stay present and acknowledge that my experience during interactions with others mattered too. Absorbing others' emotions means not extending your empathy to your own self. The problem with absorbing other people's emotions is that you're giving other people too much of your empathy and not giving enough of your empathy to yourself. Yes, that other person's experiences and feelings do matter, but so do yours. How can we stay anchored enough in our own experience to be able to communicate to others what we are feeling, what we need, what we believe, or even who we are, if during interactions with others we're more often hanging out in the other person's emotional space more so than our own? When you're standing there with that other person, how often are you checking in with yourself, your own energy? How often are you checking in with their energy? How often are you attuning to their emotional states? How often are you attuning to yours? How often are you noticing the signals that their body language is sending you? How often are you in touch with what your own body is telling you? How often are you trying to figure out what they need? And how often are you trying to figure out what you need? Do you see an imbalance here? When you pull back your energy and take responsibility for yourself and allow the other person to do the same, you gain so much of your energy back and you're so much more centered and grounded because your anchor is now rooted directly underneath you rather than somewhere way out there throwing you off balance. When you are focused on healthy relationship dynamics, it means that the people you end up allowing into your daily life are other people who are also upholding healthy relationship dynamics. There is no alternative. One person cannot hold a standard for healthy relationships while another person doesn't, and have any relationship between them solidify. That would, by its own definition, be impossible. If you stop taking responsibility for other people, refuse to cross your side of the table, pull back to the halfway point, and another person does not meet you in the middle, then by the facts alone, a connection cannot take place. A connection, by definition, is formed when two things actually meet and make contact. When you overextend, you only leave a little bit of room on the other side for someone else to fill. So naturally, you'll get people on the other side of that who will only give a little bit. When you refuse to do someone else's work, they'll have no choice than to do it. No alternative than to show up in accordance with that standard. And that's much healthier for everyone involved. It's their responsibility to be in touch with their own emotions and needs and communicate them to you. It's primarily their responsibility to figure out what they need and ask for it. You can offer ways to help, but ultimately it's their decision to allow or accept your help. And this goes for you too. It's your responsibility to be in touch with your own emotions and needs so that you can communicate them too. A relationship cannot truly exist without authenticity on both sides. If you are not in touch with your own needs and feelings, thoughts and beliefs, opinions, preferences, etc., then there really isn't a way for you to be communicating or expressing them clearly. And if you aren't sending out clear messages about who you are, then is anyone ever truly getting to know the real you? How can you have a relationship with something that is elusive, unclear, wishy-washy, or a moving target? Are you really in a relationship with someone if you don't know who they are? If they don't communicate their authentic thoughts, feelings, opinions, and experiences to you? Absorbing others' emotions doesn't deepen connection in relationships. It makes authentic connection harder. In order to absorb other people's emotions, you have to create the space within yourself to do so. And in order to make room, you have to push your experiences out. You step outside of yourself and become this empty vessel, ready to embody their reflection, ready to let their experiences pour into the container that would normally hold your experience. Now, imagine you're the other person in this scenario. You are the other person watching this individual across from you become this empty container that has abandoned their own experience so that they can be a sponge soaking up everyone else around them. How can someone truly get to know the empty vessel, the sponge, the person who is pushing out their own experiences to make room to absorb that of others? How can you truly ever feel close to a shapeshifter, a chameleon? Where is the authentic version of them if it's buried under a collective culmination of everyone else's stuff around them that they continuously absorb? Who are they truly getting to know? If you can't differentiate yourself, your experience, your emotions from that of another, then where did you go? If your authentic self is absent, then there cannot be authentic connection. This is not our intention, of course. Our intention is not to be empty, to be shifty, to be a copycat, to be inauthentic. Maybe on a deeper level, we don't want to be authentically seen, so it feels safer to just be a duplicate of whoever we're interacting with. Because then, in our minds, this greatly reduces our chances of being rejected. This shields us from the painful possibility of being truly seen for all of who we are and not loved for it. But in abandoning your own experience for the hope to avoid rejection, you end up sabotaging any chance for real connection. You have to be your own unique tapestry. Masking yourself in an invisibility cloak of another's experiences makes it so that it's guaranteed to be impossible that you will ever be truly seen and truly loved. Abandoning your own experience in the hope to deeply connect with someone else by immersing yourself in their experience renders the connection null, because you have to be an individual, your own standalone entity, in order to have a relationship with anything else. A relationship cannot exist without two distinctly separate entities. A connection, by definition, is the meeting point of separate things. When you absorb another person's experience, you start to merge with them. You become one, and your individuality becomes lost. The beautifully unique person that has her own experiences and her own thoughts and feelings is no longer present. When you merge with someone, there's no longer what we understand to be a relationship between you. A relationship implies two fully individualized things interacting and connecting with each other. When you absorb someone else's emotions, you become a mirror, reflecting back to them their own experiences, and rather than a dynamic relationship being created among the presence of two people together, what exists between them becomes just an echo, a feedback loop. When others' thoughts, opinions, feelings, and experiences start to override yours, the line between you and another person becomes blurred, and so do your boundaries and your sense of self. Absorbing others' emotions is a form of enmeshment. Enmeshment is a term in psychology that refers to unhealthy relationship dynamics, where the lines between individuals are blurred. Enmeshment occurs when family members are emotionally reactive to one another and are wholly twined in an unhealthy way. Enmeshment is a description of a relationship between two or more people in which personal boundaries are permeable and unclear. This often happens on an emotional level in which two people feel each other's emotions. We often think of boundaries as having a boundary around how much time you'll spend at work, or whether or not you'll tolerate someone else raising their voice at you, etc. But there are also more abstract boundaries, like drawing lines between where other people end and where we begin. We can have emotional boundaries where we consciously acknowledge what emotions and struggles are ours to own and which are that of someone else. Enmeshment can be defined as the experience of confusion of one's separateness from others and a reduced sense of self and autonomy in relationships. It also suggests an inability to fully experience, understand, and value one's own thoughts, feelings, and needs in the context of relationship. Those of us that have a more defined sense of self and have boundaries that are modeled after healthy standards tend to have better relationships, higher self-esteem, more energy, and are more secure individuals. After attempting to break down what absorbing other people's emotions really is, I feel that it's fairly clear that emotional absorption is a form of enmeshment and is not a pattern that's beneficial to us or those that we're in relationship with. None of what I've described so far in this video was meant to cause guilt or shame, but rather to paint a fully honest and enlightened picture of what emotional absorption truly is, and help you see how it's affecting your relationships, and empower you to now be able to lovingly and compassionately look at this part of yourself and heal it, and move forward into much more promising relational dynamics, with a much higher likelihood of cultivating deeply meaningful, mutually supportive, reciprocal, healthy relationships, in which your well-being and energy are valued, honored, respected, and protected by you and those you're in relationship with. Okay, so we've clearly established that being externally anchored in other people's experiences is not beneficial for us, the other person, or our relationship with them. And that being internally anchored within our own experiences, especially during interactions with others, is the best path forward for us. So how the heck do we become internally anchored? Well, first off, you're already so much closer to healing this by now understanding the likely root of this issue and seeing much more clearly the dysfunction of it all. Understanding the issue and its source, and that this is something that you want to change and can change, are all huge and necessary steps towards healing this pattern. The rest is going to come down to making a commitment to yourself to change this pattern. Training your mind to keep an active, conscious awareness of this dynamic while it's playing out in real time during your interactions, so that you actually have the opportunity to change it. And increasing the strength of your internal anchor by repeatedly practicing reorienting yourself during interactions with others when you notice yourself getting pulled into their experiences, and on your own, building that foundation of a strong sense of individual identity. Commitment. Making that commitment to yourself is going to be something specific to you in terms of how you solidify that. But I would recommend that the more personal and meaningful you make the commitment, the more likely you are to stick with it. Think about the reasons why changing this pattern of absorbing other people's emotions or healing self-abandonment is so important to you. Is it so that you can have healthier relationships, restore a lot of your emotional energy, feel more confident and secure and proud of yourself when you're out in the world, to strengthen your relationship with yourself, to finally give yourself the attention, love, care, consideration, and empathy that you've always deserved? Awareness. Training yourself to keep that active awareness of this pattern during interactions is going to take some conscious mental effort, because you're going to have to fight to keep your focus above this dynamic, especially in the beginning of this practice, while all of your systems are still subconsciously, by default, operating in the old way. It's kind of like trying meditation for the first time, and having to continuously practice redirecting your focus to the present moment, rather than letting yourself get sucked into your stream of incoming thoughts. You will have to commit to having the mental fortitude to make sure you are staying at the helm of the ship, and not letting the habitualness of this pattern take over and put you on autopilot, back into orienting outwardly towards everyone else. Something that may help you do this is when you are in a quieter moment alone, reflect on the subtle ways in which you remember becoming aware in the moment that you were in fact absorbing other people's emotions or abandoning your own experience. If you think back to those types of examples of interactions in your past, what were the key indicators from within your own systems that you were consumed with another person's experience? Were you feeling flooded by a sudden onset of emotions similar to theirs? Did you feel numb, like you were disconnected from your own self? Were you feeling like maybe you were having an out-of-body experience and not really aware of where you physically were in space? Did you find that you could feel yourself mirroring their facial expressions? Did you tune out your own body's signals that you were hungry, tired, needed to use the restroom, etc., because you were so focused on being present with their needs and feelings? If you can identify the ways in which your systems are sending you the message that you are disconnected from yourself, then you have the key to recognizing it much more easily while it's happening in the moment in future interactions, which grants you the opportunity to practice redirecting. Practice. Once you've grasped a clear understanding of the issue and have a solid conscious grip on recognizing this pattern, you've now got the opportunity to course correct and start practicing the art of redirecting yourself, repeatedly bringing your focus back to your own experience. This can look like practicing during interactions with others to take a moment every minute or so to connect with your own body sensations, thoughts, and emotions. Where are my feet on the ground? Can I get a sense of the surface underneath me? Am I hungry, thirsty, or sleepy? Do I feel at all uncomfortable by this interaction? If I take a few deep breaths, does that bring my locus of awareness, as if it were an energetic orb, back over to me? If you think of your locus of awareness as this little orb floating between you and whoever you're interacting with, you can then visualize and get a sense of how close this orb is to you and how close it is to them. Think of this locus of awareness orb as something that dials up the sensory information of whatever it's closest to and dampens the sensory information of what it's not in reach of. I find that using visual metaphors can help people conceptualize ideas in a way that makes them more tangible, manageable, and more lucid for them. Where if they picture it as something outside of themselves, it makes it easier to shift or change or work with. So let's explore some ways that you can visualize these ideas, with the goal to be able to better practice redirecting your awareness back to your own moment-to-moment experience. Imagining this concept as your energetic anchor, I think, is my favorite metaphor to understand it. When the anchor you're using to stay grounded in and connected to the present moment is positioned outside of yourself, it's as if you are then tethered to other people and things all around out there, which can leave you feeling off balance, disoriented, perhaps even like you have blinders on and are oblivious to your own experience, or like you've left your body and are now more attuned to someone else than you are to yourself, utilizing them as your conduit for experiencing what's around you. Almost as if you are an empty shell, and your subconscious looks to others' emotions and thoughts around you to inform your own beliefs and emotional states. When you're anchored in your own experience, you aren't getting yanked in every which way as the emotions of other people around you shift and change. Imagine you're a tree with roots planted deep into the ground beneath you, as the winds and storm and sunrise of others come and go around you. You remain anchored. You just become a grounded, compassionate observer. Let's do a little visualization exercise that you can remind yourself of later when you may need it. The reason this pattern is challenging to change is because for so many of us, it's deeply ingrained and something we've been doing subconsciously, likely from a very young age. Transformation with this will happen incrementally in each moment that you successfully redirect your locus of awareness back to yourself. Imagine you're interacting with someone you care about, someone you feel connected to. You're having a conversation, perhaps about something that they feel passionate about, or upset about, or even a situation where you are concerned with their perception of you. You come to the conscious realization in this moment that you are remarkably laser-focused on their facial expressions, body language, and the emotional energy they are emitting, and feel as though you're tunnel-visioned on them, and everything else in your periphery has faded away, gotten blurry, even gone numb, including your own sensations and experience. You've become immersed in this interaction and their expressions of their experience. In your mind, imagine yourself closing your eyes while this interaction is playing out, leaning back from this interaction, taking a deep breath in and out, and opening back up your eyes. You can still see and hear this person, but you consciously turned down the volume on what they are emitting, and are now taking a private moment to connect back in with yourself. You call back your energy to you and visualize your energetic anchor or orb of awareness slowly move out from their personal space and over to yours. The closer it gets to your side of the interaction, the more grounded, centered, calm, and neutral you feel. Your body sensations, your feelings, your thoughts become louder and more clear, while theirs become just a little bit quieter, just enough for you to remain present within your own experience. You're still there with them, observing, supporting, listening, but now your energy is primarily contained within your own personal space, almost as if you are now looking at and hearing them through a glass barrier. You can still clearly see them, you can still hear them well, but their experience is just dampened in your awareness a little bit. There's a clear separation between where they end and where your experience begins. Your mind is now clear enough to take in the interaction and see what they are experiencing with enough distance to be outside of their bubble, which allows you to see clearly what they are feeling and experiencing, enough so that you can more easily validate them and call out what you are seeing. You verbally acknowledging and affirming what they're experiencing is making them feel seen, heard, and at ease. They've now softened. Without being tethered to their fluctuating states, you can now be more present with what they need from you, a more clear-headed, grounded presence, which in turn reserves your energy and helps you show up more authentically and stay true to yourself. You're able to offer them better insights and observations, offer them a more grounded energy, and think about what within your realm of responsibility you can do to meet them in the middle of this interaction. Your thoughts aren't mixed with theirs, so you can communicate more clearly. Your emotions are your own, so you can express your feelings more accurately. Visualize this warm, glowing light now located at your core, representing your energy, your locus of awareness, your essence. You are now internally anchored. Imagine how it feels to have a healthy, effective interaction with another person, as your own full individual. Mind, heart, and body aligned, connected. Imagine how it would feel to be able to consistently remain anchored and aware of your own experience, to be able to easily tune into your thoughts and feelings and eloquently communicate them. Imagine relationships in which it feels safe and beneficial for you to remain internally anchored, knowing that those you love want you to feel calm, safe, and secure enough to be able to focus on your own needs and experiences. If we have this glowing energy orb that serves as our anchor, that goes wherever our attention and energy goes, and it wanders outside the boundary of our own personal bubble, out there it's susceptible to absorbing all kinds of stuff. It's floating around, untethered, without a home. But when it's anchored within your own internal sense of self, your own boundary of anchored awareness, it's protected, it's organized, it's authentic, it's calm, grounded, and clear. The other important task of strengthening your internal anchor is building the foundation of a strong sense of self, which will make it a lot easier to practice being oriented towards your own experiences during interactions, because your anchor within yourself will be much stronger, and therefore much easier to pull back to in the moment, especially when needed. This is something you do outside of interactions with others, on your own time, without others' input or influence. You can, if needed, consult trusted loved ones whose opinions you feel confident are grounded in reality and coming from good intentions, for help brainstorming what qualities describe your authentic self, etc. But that's it. The rest should come from you. Get to know who you are and solidify that image. Focus on the good qualities, the topics and subjects and activities that make you feel alive, etc. Sit with yourself in quieter moments to identify what your own energy field feels like an energy signature, so that when you go out into the world, you can more easily detect what is and isn't yours. This helps with differentiation. Get to know your body's signals and be more present in your physical sensations. The more you tune into your body and stop dissociating from your experience, attend to your own needs and feelings, etc., the less that energy center will be anchored externally, and the easier it becomes to just observe and understand, rather than absorb. And finally, cultivate your sense of self-love and self-respect, because by doing that, by default, you'll have an easier time staying in your own experience, because you will inherently honor and respect it more. You'll have an easier time feeling like you deserve to be anchored in your own experience, and will more deeply sense how important this is for your own health and happiness. When I started forming a stronger sense of self and became more loyal to and grounded in my own thoughts, feelings, and opinions, and practiced identifying what those are, that energetic locus of my attention started more easily and quickly returning back to me during interactions, rather than it being staked somewhere outside of myself. That's the best way I can describe it. I no longer felt tethered to everyone else's swaying and changing thoughts and opinions and feelings, which also subsequently made me feel much more emotionally grounded. It became abundantly clear to me which emotions were mine and which were other people's. I no longer had to consciously sort through them, try and shield myself from them, or spend all this time trying to recover after interactions. By working to heal my self-abandonment wounds and become internally anchored, I've gained a level of self-confidence, groundedness, and internal calm that I'd never been previously able to attain in my life before. I've also come up with a mantra I've found to be really helpful in working towards changing this pattern of absorbing others' emotions that I will share with you so that you can use it and hopefully benefit from it as well as you work to heal and improve these patterns within yourself. The mantra is, I can observe without absorbing. You can be your own individual and still remain very present and connected with those you care for. You can be sensitive and empathetic without needing to change someone else's emotional state. You can observe without absorbing. Remember, your only job is to hold the space, to be a compassionate and understanding presence, to listen with attentiveness, and serve as a safe place where the other person is free to feel their feelings and open up, come to their own conclusions, and discover and communicate their own needs. You are there to observe, acknowledge, validate, and support them, and connect with them by meeting them in the middle, not to absorb their feelings and experiences. And I'll leave you with one last reminder. Remember that you deserve your empathy just as much as those you love do. The problem here of absorbing people's emotions is not because you have a high degree of empathy for others. It's that you are not currently also extending this empathy to yourself and remembering that your needs, emotions, and experiences matter just as much as theirs do. I hope that the ideas that I've shared and discussing these patterns and the ways that we've been conditioned to repeatedly abandon ourselves will help you start to gain your power back over this dynamic within yourself and help you bring your awareness to these patterns playing out in the moment so that you then have the opportunity to heal and improve them. Clarify and solidify your own sense of who you are. Practice identifying and calling out your own feelings, and discerning which thoughts and beliefs are truly yours, and which are just implantations of others who have been influential to you. Look for evidence within your own life that absorbing other people's emotions and abandoning your experience is not truly beneficial for you, and that at the end of the day, it's not ideal to hope to take away someone else's pain, or to attempt to take on their emotions for them. I hope you will start to see and truly know and experience the benefits and the beauty that there is in just being a loving presence. For your sake, for the other person's sake, and for the health of the relationship between you. If you resonate with my ideas and want to heal and change more of these patterns, recalibrate your mindset and have healthier relationships, more energy, and a more fulfilling life as a highly sensitive person, and would love to have practical step-by-step guidance, my program and online course have so much to offer. There's help with setting boundaries, showing up authentically, overcoming the fear of rejection, and so much more. And that's only on the topic of relationships. I also help you with your health and your career. On this particular topic of absorbing others' emotions. In my course, I've also included a worksheet with self-reflection prompts, journaling exercises, guided practices, affirmations, and more to go with these teachings. So those in my program can more easily implement and solidify what you learn, so that you can truly start to see real tangible results in your life. And for those of you that are interested who watched all the way to the end of this video, I'm rewarding you with a coupon for that program. You can use YouTube50 at checkout to get $50 off your first 3 months of the membership. Until then, I hope you've enjoyed this video and I'll see you in the next one.